What's up, everybody? It's your man, MG Marcus Grant. Do you love On the Beat? Do you love the NBA? Well, good news. We've got a show called On the Beat NBA for you. It is every week with Steezy A. Smith talking to some of the beat writers from across the association. So be sure to check it out on the 32-Bit Network.
Yo, what is going on, y'all? It's your boy, it's your host, Calvin Domingo, a.k.a. Steezy A. Smith, in the first episode of On Beat NBA edition. This time featuring the New York Knicks. And you guys know my saying by now. I got another VIG with me. I didn't say a VIP. I said I got a very important guest. He covers the New York Knicks. Please, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mr. Tommy Beer. How you doing, Mr. Tommy?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much. So you're over there on the East Coast, right? What you got going on?
Yes, sir. A little bit rainy out here in New York today, but can't complain. Still, the first week of free agency. Agency starting on Friday. Always an exciting time. Just had the draft, so yeah, good times.
It's about to go down. But real quick, I just wanted to say I'm over here in Seattle, so the rain is something that I'm used to. Something that I'm not used to is being in 100-degree weather, because right now the sun is just absolutely blazing. And so I'm kind of glad that it's sunny over here, though I do feel kind of bad that it's raining over there. But Mr. Tommy, let's just get right into it. I just wanted to ask, you don't work for Forbes anymore, do you?
I don't. No, I actually went out on my own, started a Substack. So I got my own newsletter. Going to be rolling out a podcast at the start of the NBA season. So trying to do the independent thing. Bet on yourself,
Yes, sir. Hey, the best bet you can ever make is on yourself.
Amen.
And the best investment you can make is on yourself.
Amen.
Yes, sir. And speaking of your newsletter / podcast, I saw on Twitter that you actually recently started that about half a year ago, back in December, right?
Yes, sir.
So, and it's called, for those of you guys that are listening, by the way, please be sure to read the newsletter. I've tapped in with a couple articles myself, but it's called What's on Tap with Tommy Beer. And like you talked about, you're going to drop a podcast once the season starts. And so, Tommy, I wanted to ask, what's been the biggest challenge, or what's been the most challenging thing about being independent? And this is a two-part question, but what's been your biggest takeaway so far, after having gone independent?
Good question. I thought, I think it's kind of been similar. There's a lot of challenges. Kind of because I've kind of run the gauntlet. I've worked for NBC, I've worked for Forbes, I've done the freelance thing, I've worked for Basketball News and contributed there as well. So there's a lot of pros and cons that go along with being an employee, the stability, kind of everything that goes along with it. I think the biggest benefit for working for yourself is being your own editor, and just kind of being reliant upon yourself and kind of dictating yourself to your own schedule. I have 2 young kids at home, and they're my priority. Like when people ask me, what I do or what I want to be, like a dad, like that's my priority. That's what's far and away most important. So making time for my children, being a good husband is, the kind of the things that I put first and foremost. So I having the ability to kind of shape everything out around that, under that, kind of guiding principle, has been there's been a lot of advantages there in terms of I can work a little bit, do a few hours here, go pick up my daughter from school, take her to the park, come back, do a few more hours work, do some hours after I put her to bed. So there's benefits and advantages there that I think I've really appreciated. But along with that comes with editing your own work. People have questions about how to sign up or process payments. You kind of got to deal with those. But I will say that Substack has been a quality partner in just kind of handling that minutia, how to process payments and all that other stuff, and signing people up and distributing the newsletter has been kind of a seamless process. So I know, I guess, ask me again in a year or so. Hopefully we'll kind of be building and continuing to grow. But so far so good. I've enjoyed the process.
Smooth sailing, right?
A little bit, few bumps in the road, but what is it they say? Don't pray for smooth seas. Pray for a boat sturdy enough to kind of handle the turbulence, because it's going to come.
Yes, sir. 100%. I just wanted to say, it takes a lot of discipline You know what I mean? I could definitely relate, not to get into myself because this episode's about you, but for the last couple of years, I've been independent myself, trying to make a way. And so I definitely understand the challenges, not only of editing, not only of putting out your own product, but just having to promote yourself, you know what I mean? Because marketing and whatnot, everybody works hard, but, not everyone's going to shine, you know what I mean? So to be able to find a way to put yourself out there, it's almost like it's double the work. But then like you talked about the advantages, the benefits, and you're doing it the right way. You know what I mean? You're focused on being a father first. You're focusing on being, the best husband that you could possibly be. And I can't knock you for that, right? But Mr. Beard, you talked about, or actually I saw one of your latest articles on what's on tap with Tommy Beard. And I thought this was very interesting because I didn't see this or I didn't know this myself, but Tyus Jones in the last 2 years leads all point guards or all players for that matter in games with 5+ assists and less than two turnovers. And that list also includes the likes of a baby boy, DeJounte Murray, Chris Paul, Mike Conley. And so I thought that was real interesting. And so if the Knicks, and you already talked about this, how it reeks of desperation if they're to go after a Jalen Brunson. And so if they fail to get a Jalen Brunson, what are Knicks fans or what would they be getting in a Tyus Jones?
Yeah, so that's kind of been it's dominated my mentions over the last couple of days, folks. Kind of the debate back and forth. So my take on Brunson is, I think he's a great player. I think he's a winner. Going back to Villanova, everywhere he's gone, he's contributed, both on and off the floor. Solid citizen. His father, as we know, played in the NBA, comes from good bloodlines, understands the league and the way the game is played. We saw this past season really took his game to the next level, especially with Luka was sidelined during the regular season and at the start of the postseason. So he's a guy that will be able to contribute, no doubt, no question. The question is at what point is his contract a value contract, and what point are you overpaying? For me, I thought, and I was a proponent of the Knicks trying to trade for him back in February, when we kind of foresaw this coming, with the Mavericks be willing to match, because the Mavericks chose not to sign him to an extension. He basically, and reports are he would have been willing to sign a $55 million contract with Dallas as of last summer, or even, at certain point in January or prior to the deadline. As we know, because he played so well in the second half of the season, the postseason, that cost has skyrocketed. But around that time, my thought process was, if Dallas is willing to move him, get out in front of it, trade for him now. But Dallas obviously needed to make a playoff run. It made sense. They went all the way to the Western Conference Finals. But my thinking was, you're going to resign him at like 16 to $18 million a year, somewhere in that neighborhood, which I thought was a relatively, certainly reasonable contract. If you had to go up to 20, that still probably made sense. Again, point guard's a major need for New York. But now you're looking at a contract starting at around 25 million. I had one league source text me that they wouldn't be shocked if it went all the way up to 30 million, which to me is just, if you're looking at around 120 million over a 4-year deal for a guy like Jalen Brunson, would make him one of the 50 highest paid players in the league. That is, you're setting yourself up for a disaster. One, Brunson's going to come in with a ton of expectations. Knicks fans are going to expect him to be a 23-point scorer or 8 assists, whatever the case might be. He's just not built that way. He's more of a connector on the floor. He can score if you need to. He can facilitate. He can get into the paint. So it's just, that is where I think the cons outweigh the pros. So my thinking is, not only is Tyus Jones a solid fallback plan, if I was Leon Rose and Worldwide West and those guys running the Knicks right now, my priority actually would be to see if I can get Tyus Jones away from Memphis. The Grizzlies hold his bird right, so they can obviously exceed what New York can offer. But if Jones wants an opportunity to start, Morant's the guy there now. Maybe the Knicks could offer in the $13 million range. That would bring Jones. And to me, having Jones at around $50 million over 4 years is a better allocation of your salary cap space than signing Brunson to a 115, 110, 100, wherever that, a contract starting north of $25 million. So that's kind of my thought process and what I argued in the article.
I mean, it'd be a very Nick thing to do, right? To overpay for a guy like a Jalen Brunson, who we all love.
Yes.
We acknowledge that he did his thing. He did his Dougie in the playoffs. But we've seen all of his success throughout the years at Villanova. In Dallas, he was never the featured guy. He was never the number one option. And so I think he's definitely setting himself up for, I hate to say this word, but failure, especially if he's the number one guy. Maybe not in terms of his bank account, right? But as far as his on-field or the on-court product, I don't know if he'd be as efficient. I don't know if he'd be winning as many games. And I don't know if the tandem of him and Randall would be enough to even take this team to the playoffs, given how stacked, especially the East, is looking now.
And that's the thing. If you're the Knicks, and sometimes you gotta overpay to get a guy. If you feel he's going to emerge into a surefire all-star, whatever the case might be, or he's the piece that takes you from championship contender to championship favorite.
Exactly.
The best case scenario with Brunson is what, 6 seed, maybe. If Brunson and Randall are accounting for 55-60% of your salary cap, that's a tough place to be. Going forward. For a team that's this 9th seed, 7th seed, 8th seed, somewhere in that neighborhood. And as we know, the worst place to be in the NBA is in that, 11 seed, 7 seed, 9 seed range, because you're not good enough to actually compete for a championship, and you're not bad enough to get a high lottery pick. And as we know, over the last 20 years, the Knicks have been stuck in that NBA no man's land, and we know what the results are. So to me, this is running full speed, assuming that they do, in fact, and mind you, the Knicks only have around $17 million in cap space as of this afternoon. In order to get to 23, 25, 27 million, they have to make another deal. Mm-hmm. That's whether that's trading Alec Burks or trading Nerlens Noel. They're most likely going to have to attach additional draft capital to get rid of those guys. So now not only are you overpaying for Brunson, you're giving up draft picks for the privilege to do so. Again, maybe Brunson's the piece and he explodes in New York. It's, again, it's not a bad player. That's why I think fans have the misconception sometimes. How can adding a good player make your team worse? It's because the NBA and the salary cap and all the machinations involved in creating cap space and the value of cap space and future draft picks, etc. So if the ultimate goal is winning a championship, which it should be, as opposed to a goal of making the playoffs so I can keep my job and keep the owner happy, this is not what I think is the best path forward for New York.
And Mr. Beard, do you have time for just a couple more questions?
Sure, fire away.
Okay, yes, sir. So I just wanted to say, maybe the Knicks are super confident in RJ Barrett becoming that third star, because if they bring in a Jalen Brunson, they're confident in RJ Barrett, and they're confident in Julius Randle bouncing back to his 2020 year. Do you think that elevates their ceiling if RJ Barrett could at least?
Sure, and I certainly think they are high on RJ Barrett, and they have reason to be. Productive player, well-rounded scorer. He can rebound, pass the basketball. Defensively, he's shown some ups and downs. The issue with Barrett is you're going to have to give him the bag if you want to keep him in New York. Is he looking for a max contract? You're talking 160 million, 180 million. I'm a fan of RJ Barrett. Whether I am willing to give him the max, it's a very difficult conversation to have. I'd prefer to give him a slightly less than the max. If I have to give him the full max to keep him in New York, you probably do so. And then maybe if things don't work out, he's probably a player you can trade. It won't be a negative net value contract. So it complicates things. But yeah, to your point, even if RJ does kind of take that next step forward, which for him would be increasing his efficiency, he was wildly inefficient over his first few years in the league. Does a big three of Brunson, Randall, and Barrett compete with the likes of Giannis and the Bucks and Embiid and Harden, and who knows what goes on in Brooklyn? We'll leave them aside for a moment. But Tatum and Brown are still very young in Boston, and Smart and Robert Williams. The East is getting better, and there's no reason to assume that it'll just fall off a cliff over the next couple of years. So again, from my perspective, from New York, let's look 2-3 years down the road, not 2-3 months.
100%. And take this with a grain of salt, because I'm a Miami Heat fan, but they also have to worry about Jimmy Buckets and Kyrie in Miami.
Definitely. No doubt. And that with those guys in their prime, be interesting to see what happens with Lowry. But, assuming he gets in shape, I know Riley wants him to do so. Bam. And, it's obviously just come to his own. He hasn't even started his prime yet. But you got, Jimmy and Kyle Lowry and those guys, still obviously in the prime. Riley's going to do what he can to kind of build out around the edges. So, again, yes, the Heat are another team that's in that conversation conversation. The Raptors are going to be good again. Plenty of teams in that top 5 or 6 seeds.
Mr. Beer, final question for you. If the Knicks fail to get a Tyus Jones, if they fail to get a Jalen Brunson, if they fail to get anyone else, how likely is it that they pivot towards Indiana Pacers' Malcolm Brogdon?
Yeah, I think that's a likely scenario, actually, because they are, in my opinion, and I've written about this as well, the best thing, again, thinking long term, I'm not worried about necessarily a short-term improvement. Give the keys to Emmanuel quickly for a season.
IQ.
Played really well at the end of over the second half of the season. Played really well the last month of the season. Is he a starting point guard in the NBA? I don't know. I think you can certainly argue it one way or the other. You have a segment of the fan base that believes he can be. He can kind of take that Tyrese Maxey kind of step. We saw what his former Kentucky teammate did in Philadelphia. When he kind of went. He was thrust into the starting point guard spot with the Ben Simmons drama last season and responded by establishing himself as one of the better young point guards in the NBA. Can IQ take that step? I'm not convinced, but I think it's well worth finding out. Worst case scenario, he falls on his face. Then you have a better idea of whether or not to extend him for how much money. You improve your draft position. You save cap space to take on another team's contract, which another team will have to attach a draft pick, etc. As far as Brogdon is concerned, but that's what I think the Knicks should do. What I think they will do is what you mentioned. I think they'll put a Band-Aid on the point guard position, bring in Malcolm Brogdon, who again I'm a fan of, much like Brunson. Good player, solid player, can shoot, solid, efficient scorer, can pass the basketball, takes care of the basketball, limits turnovers, solid defender. This guy was a former defensive player of the year at ACC when he was at Virginia. He's slowed down a little bit. The big question, obviously, with Brunson is, with Brogdon is, can he stay healthy? Has been unable to do so the last few years. But again, at the right price, I think Brogdon makes sense. Because even if he doesn't, take the Knicks to the next step, I think when he only has 2 years left on his deal or 1 year left on his deal, it's around $22 million, which isn't crazy. It's basically the average amount for a starting point guard, and maybe a little bit above. I think it. So I think that I wouldn't. I know some Knicks fans would hate trading, bringing in Brogdon. But again, I think it so much depends on what you have to give up. Do you have to give up a future first? Do you have to give up one of your young players, whether that be IQ or Obi or Grimes? And I think that would be a big mistake. But if the Pacers get desperate, we'll see. Kind of how they handle the situation. I'm sure they would prefer to move. Brogdon, obviously they have Halliburton, is their guy going forward. So we'll see how it plays out.
Just my 2 cents real quickly. I thought the Knicks, and obviously this is with them as a head coach, and so, we take this with a grain of salt, but I thought that, or I look at IQ, and even if he's not a natural point guard, he's more of a point guard than Alec Burks is. Right? And so to me, it's just like, what are the Knicks doing at point guard? And I just wanted to add, I think with the Pacers and Malcolm Brogdon, his values are at an all-time low. He's played in less games than Anthony Davis in the last 2 to 3 years. And when your name is in that same sentence, as an Anthony Davis, and we're talking about injuries, that's not necessarily a good thing. So I think Knicks fans, they shouldn't fret. Malcolm Brogdon, like you talked about as well, he's also a former NBA Rookie of the Year. So he's no slouch. He's no scrub. Definitely a 20-plus point game, 20-plus per game scorer. And so the Knicks would be getting a solid consolation prize in Malcolm Brogdon. But Tommy, you know what they say. Time flies when you're having fun. And so before we go, I just wanted to give you the floor, give yourself a chance, an opportunity to kind of, not just talk about your socials and to plug yourself, but, talk to the people, let her know what's coming up, any announcements and things of that nature. But go ahead. The floor is yours.
Sure. Appreciate it. Find me on Twitter at Tommy Beer. That is the link to my Substack and all my other stuff. So any questions you might have, any comments, definitely feel free to reach out to me there. Next week, this week is going to be all about free agency. We'll kind of, preview what the Knicks might do. I got a post coming out, top 50 overall free agents. That'll probably publish sometime later today. Probably do it in 2 parts, but that'll be this week. Then we got free agency starting late this week, and we'll recap that over the weekend, heading into next week. Then we got Vegas, Summer League. Looking forward to watching my guy Deuce McBride, another option for point guard possibilities in New York. I certainly think he deserves far more playing time than he did last year, which is another reason why I don't want to overpay Brunson. At Tommy Beer on Twitter is the for any content that's the place to find me.
And if you already subscribed, if you haven't read any of the articles, what's on tap with Tommy Beer? But ladies and gentlemen, this has been Mr. Tommy Beer. It's been a pleasure. It's been a ride. Thank you so much for taking the time, and I hope you have a great day, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure, my guy. I appreciate you.
I'm ready for all today.